You can think of the Earth's surface as a cracked eggshell. It's broken into huge pieces we call tectonic plates. These plates are always moving, grinding against each other, pulling apart, or crashing together. Most of this action happens deep under the oceans, but in one part of Africa, it's happening on dry land, right before our eyes. And it's been happening for millions of years. This is the Great Rift Valley. It's a massive scar on the face of the continent. It runs for thousands of miles from the Middle East all the way down to Mozambique. In some places, it's a wide, shallow depression. In others, it's a deep trench with towering cliffs on either side. It's a place of volcanoes, deep lakes, and vast open plains. It is, quite simply, one of the most geologically active places on the planet. The African continent is literally tearing itself apart along this line. A new ocean is slowly, very slowly, being born. But the reason we talk about it so much isn't just about geology. It's because this violent, dynamic place is also the cradle of humanity. This valley isn't just a scar on the earth, it's the stage where the story of our evolution played out. The very forces that are ripping Africa apart are the same forces that created the conditions for our ancestors to stand up on 2 feet, to develop bigger brains, and to eventually become us. To understand why the Great Rift Valley is so important, you have to see it as two things at once. It was an engine for evolution, and it was a perfect trap for preserving the evidence. One without the other would have left us in the dark. Let's start with the engine part. How does a geological feature drive evolution? Before the Rift Valley really got going, say 20 or 30 million years ago, a lot of Africa was covered in a continuous blanket of forest. Our distant ancestors, some kind of ape-like creature, lived in these trees. They were perfectly adapted for that life. They moved through the branches, ate fruit, and were probably quite happy doing it. Then, the ground started to split. Deep beneath the surface, plumes of hot magma from the Earth's mantle pushed upwards, stretching the crust above it. The crust got thin and brittle, and it started to crack and break. Huge blocks of land dropped down, forming the valley floor. The land on either side was pushed up, creating high cliffs or escarpments. This process didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, grinding process that unfolded over millions of years. This geological upheaval had a massive impact on the climate. The newly formed highlands along the edges of the Rift Valley acted like a wall. They started blocking the moist air coming in from the ocean. East of this new wall, the climate began to dry out. The continuous, lush forest started to break apart. It didn't vanish completely. Instead, it became a patchwork. You'd have a patch of dense woodland here, a stretch of open grassland there, with a river or a lake nearby. This is what scientists call a mosaic environment, and this new environment presented a huge problem for the creatures living there. The old way of life wasn't working anymore. The trees were no longer a continuous highway. They were islands in a sea of grass. To get from one patch of food or shelter to another, you had to cross open ground. And the open ground was dangerous. Predators could see you. This is where the pressure to change started. This is the engine of evolution at work. The environment changed, and the animals had to adapt, move, or die. One of the first and most important adaptations was bipedalism, walking on 2 legs. For a long time, we thought our ancestors developed big brains first, and that our intelligence led to all the other changes. But the fossils from the Rift Valley turned that idea on its head. They showed us, clearly, that we were walking upright long before our brains started to expand significantly. Why walk on 2 legs? Nobody knows for sure, but the mosaic environment of the Rift Valley gives us some good clues. Walking on 2 legs frees up your hands. You can carry food, you can carry your offspring, you can carry a stick or a rock for defense. In a world where resources are spread out, being able to carry things back to a safe spot is a big advantage. Walking upright also helps you see over tall grass. You can spot predators from farther away, and you can spot your next meal or a distant patch of trees. It can also be a more energy-efficient way to travel long distances. If you have to walk for miles between food sources, efficiency matters. Finally, standing up tall might have helped with regulating body temperature. Less of your body is exposed to the direct overhead sun, and you catch more of the cooling breezes. Whatever the primary reason or combination of reasons, the pressure was there. The new landscape of the Rift Valley favored creatures that could move effectively on the ground. The forest apes stayed in the shrinking forests, but a new lineage, our lineage, started to embrace the open ground. They took their first steps into a new world, literally. The dynamic nature of the valley didn't stop there. It wasn't just a one-time change from forest to savanna. The climate in the Rift Valley has been incredibly unstable for millions of years. Because of its unique topography and its relationship to global climate cycles, the valley went through intense periods of wet and dry. These lakes would appear expanding to massive sizes and then shrink away to almost nothing. The landscape was constantly changing. This instability was another powerful evolutionary filter. It meant that being a specialist was a bad idea. If you evolved to only eat one type of plant that grew by the lake, you were in trouble when the lake dried up. The creatures that survived and thrived were the generalists, the ones that were adaptable, clever, and resourceful. The ones that could figure out how to find food in a wet season and a dry season. This constant environmental challenge likely put a premium on intelligence and problem solving. It favored bigger brains. So the geology created the stage. It broke up the forest, created a new mosaic world, and pushed our ancestors out of the trees. The unstable climate then acted as a relentless trainer, demanding flexibility and intelligence. The Rift Valley wasn't just a backdrop to our evolution, it was the driving force. It was the crucible that forged the key human traits of bipedalism and large brains. But that's only half of the story. How do we know any of this? This is where the second part of the Rift Valley's importance comes in. It was a perfect fossil trap. It's one thing for our ancestors to have lived and died there. It's another thing entirely for their fragile bones to survive for millions of years and for us to find them. The same geology that drove our evolution also created the perfect conditions for preserving its history. When an animal dies, its body usually disappears pretty quickly. Scavengers eat it. The sun, wind, and rain break down the bones. They turn to dust. For a fossil to form, the remains have to be buried quickly. The burial protects the bones from the elements and allows minerals to slowly seep in, turning them to stone over eons. The Great Rift Valley is one of the best places in the world for this to happen. The valley floor is a basin. Rivers flow into it, carrying sediment. Lakes form, and mud and silt settle on the bottom. When one of our ancestors died near the shore of a lake or the bank of a river, there was a good chance their body would get covered by this sediment. They were sealed away, safe from destruction. The constantly sinking valley floor meant that layers upon layers of sediment could build up over millions of years, creating a thick, layered cake of history. And then there are the volcanoes. The rift is a hotbed of volcanic activity. This is a direct result of the crust being stretched thin. Magma can easily reach the surface. These volcanoes, like Mount Kilimanjaro and Mount Kenya, are iconic features of the landscape. For paleontologists, they are an absolute gift. When a volcano erupts, it spews out a massive cloud of ash. This ash settles over the landscape like a blanket, covering everything, including any bones lying on the surface. This is another fantastic way to bury and preserve fossils, but the volcanic ash does something even more important. It gives us a date. Volcanic ash contains radioactive elements like potassium-40. When the ash settles and cools, this potassium-40 starts to decay into another element, argon-40, at a very precise known rate. It's like a clock that starts ticking the moment the rock is formed. By measuring the ratio of potassium-40 to argon-40 in a layer of ash, scientists can calculate, with incredible accuracy, how long ago that eruption happened. This is a game changer. It means that if you find a fossil embedded between two layers of volcanic ash, you have a very precise date range for that fossil. You know it's older than the layer above it and younger than the layer below it. This technique, called radiometric dating, is what allows us to build a timeline for human evolution. Without the volcanoes of the Rift Valley, we would just have a collection of old bones. With them, we have a dated story. We can say with confidence that this species lived 3.2 million years ago, and that species lived 1.8 million years ago. It turns a jumble of clues into a coherent narrative. The final piece of the puzzle is exposure. It's no good if the fossils are buried under thousands of feet of rock and sediment. We have to be able to find them, and once again, the geology of the Rift Valley cooperates. The same forces of uplift and faulting that created the valley are still at work. They push and tilt the ancient layers of sediment. Then wind and rain get to work, eroding the softer rock and cutting through the layers. This erosion exposes the ancient fossil beds. It's as if the Earth is slowly opening its history book for us to read. Paleontologists can walk along these eroded gullies and badlands and literally pick our history up off the ground. This combination of factors is unique, a dynamic environment that drove evolution. Rapid burial and sediment to preserve the bones, volcanic ash layers to provide a timeline, and finally, erosion to bring the fossils back to the surface. It's a perfect storm of geological and biological circumstance. That is why the Great Rift Valley has yielded such an incredible wealth of fossils that tell the story of our origins. And what a story it is. The discoveries made in the valley have completely rewritten our understanding of who we are and where we come from. For decades, the focus was on Asia and Europe, but in the mid-20th century, a family of paleontologists, the Leakeys, started making incredible finds in Olduvai Gorge, a part of the Rift Valley in Tanzania. Mary and Louis Leakey discovered fossils of what they called Paranthropus boisei, a robust, big-jawed hominin nicknamed Nutcracker Man. They also found Homo habilis, the handyman, a creature with a slightly larger brain who was found alongside the first simple stone tools. Their work firmly established Africa, and specifically the Rift Valley, as the heartland of human evolution. Then, in 1974, in the Afar region of Ethiopia, another part of the rift, Donald Johanson and his team found something extraordinary. They found 47 fossilized bones belonging to a single individual. It was a small female who lived 3.2 million years ago. They named her Lucy. She belonged to the species Australopithecus afarensis. Lucy was a revelation. Her skeleton was remarkably complete, about 40%, and it told a clear story. Her hip and knee joints showed, without a doubt, that she walked upright. She was fully bipedal, but her skull was small, with a brain not much bigger than a chimpanzee's. Her long arms suggested she was still comfortable in the trees. Here was the proof we walked on two legs for millions of years before our brains started to get big. Bipedalism came first. Lucy was the rock-solid evidence that confirmed the theories born from the Rift Valley's landscape. Just a few years later, Mary Leakey made another stunning discovery at a site called Laetoli, not far from Olduvai. It wasn't bones, it was footprints. A nearby volcano had erupted, blanketing the ground in a layer of fine ash. A light rain fell, turning the ash into a kind of wet cement. And then, 3.6 million years ago, 3 of our ancestors walked across this surface. The sun then baked their footprints hard, and another layer of ash sealed them away. What Mary Leakey found was a trail of fossilized footprints. A large individual, a smaller one, and an even smaller one walking in the tracks of the first. It was a breathtaking snapshot of a moment in time. A family, perhaps, walking together. It's one of the most powerful and human pieces of evidence we have from our deep past. It's not just about how they were built, it's about how they lived. They were social creatures, moving together across the Rift Valley landscape. The list of discoveries goes on and on. Richard Leakey, the son of Mary and Lewis, found the Turkana boy in Kenya. This was a nearly complete skeleton of a young Homo erectus, or Homo ergaster, from about 1.6 million years ago. He's tall and slender, with body proportions much like our own. His brain was significantly larger than Lucy's. This was a new kind of hominin, one that was fully adapted to life on the ground. And it was this species born and bred in the Rift Valley that would be the first to walk out of Africa and colonize the rest of the world. So when we ask why the Great Rift Valley is so important for understanding our evolution, the answer is layered, just like the valley's geology. It's important because its unique geological activity created the exact environmental pressures that forced our ape-like ancestors to change. It turned a world of trees into a world of challenges and opportunities. It favored walking on two legs. It favored intelligence and adaptability. It was the physical force that nudged our lineage down a different evolutionary path. It's also important because that same geology created the perfect vault to store the records of this transformation. The sinking valley floor, the rivers, the lakes, and the volcanoes all work together to bury, preserve, and date the skeletal evidence of our ancestors. Without these specific conditions, the fossils of Lucy, the Laetoli footprints, and the Turkana boy would have simply turned to dust. We would know almost nothing about the first crucial chapters of our story. And finally, it's important because it's still happening. The Rift Valley is not a static museum. It's an active process. The continent is still splitting apart at about the rate your fingernails grow. And the volcanoes still rumble, the climate still shifts. Standing in the Great Rift Valley today, you can feel the immense scale of geological time. You can see the forces that shaped us still at work. It connects us to our deepest past in a very real, physical way. It's not just a place on a map, it's our ancestral home, the place that made us human.